Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority. First of all, can I check that everybody can hear me, because at the last meeting there were some issues. Can everybody hear me? Yes?
Sorry?
Oh.
Somebody had to do it.
Don't make it difficult for me before we've even started. Anyway, well, welcome. So turning to your agenda, item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We've got apologies from Councillors Stubbs, Fairhurst and Glenn, and you'll note that Councillor Jonas is here as the Deputy Member for Portsmouth City Council.
Yes, thank you for that. I already had apologies from Councillor Stubbs. I had various messages from Jonathan Glenn yesterday saying he was back from America. Obviously, it must be something to do with the Monarch situation. He was due to go to France this weekend, but then he was at great pains to tell me he had to go to France today. So his apologies. Liz Fairhurst, I'm aware, has been on holiday in Spain on a Monarch flight, and we weren't sure whether she was going to get back here. Clearly, she's not able to get back in. So we welcome Councillor Frank Jonas here as substitute for Portsmouth. You're very welcome, Frank. This does give me the opportunity to just, albeit a little bit late, to congratulate you on behalf of the Fire Authority for your award of the BEM medal by the Queen. I am aware that this was presented to you recently at Searles House by the Lord Lieutenant. So congratulations, Frank, on behalf of the authority. Very well deserved. Item 2, declarations of interest. Well, members, you're all very familiar with that. If you have any item that comes up during the meeting, will please indicate and let me know. Now, before we...
Sorry. You should be noting this, the recording of the...
Oh.
It'll be in your papers. Do you want to read it from there?
Right.
There's a much better this half.
I'm reminded that I need a paper copy. It's difficult for me to... The screen's gone blank here. Right, so going back to the opening of the meeting, I need to just read out this statement. The openness of local government bodies' regulations are in force, giving a legal right to members of the public to record, film, photograph or audio record and report on proceedings at meetings of the authority and its committees and or subcommittees. The authority has a protocol on filming, photographing and audio recording and reporting at public meetings of the authority, which is available on our website. At the start of the meeting, the chairman will make an announcement that the meeting may be recorded and reported. Anyone who remains at the meeting after the chairman's announcement may be deemed to have consented to the broadcast of their image and anything they say. And also, of course, please disable mobile phones. Thank you for that reminder. Right, now, before we proceed to item 3 on the agenda, I think it's appropriate, and this doesn't happen very often with the authority, I think it's appropriate we acknowledge the fact that just last week, last Friday, we made the decision to appoint a new chief officer with effect from the 1st of January. As you will all know, we had 2 internal candidates, and I would first like to acknowledge the incredibly professional performance that Jeff Houseago performed at his presentation. Where are you, Jeff? You're here somewhere?
I'm sitting.
Oh, you're there. Sorry. So again, I did speak to you, but again, on behalf of the authority, Jeff, thank you so much for taking part in that. in that whole process, and we really did appreciate the complexities of it, and it was incredibly challenging. In any scenario like that, there always has to be a winner, and the winner was Neil. And on behalf of the authority, formally, Neil, we're delighted to welcome you as the new Chief Fire Officer with effect from the 1st of January. At this opportunity, this gives me an opportunity to invite Dave Curry, the existing Chief, to say a few words, and then Neil himself, if you'd like to.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, can I thank the Fire Authority for what I genuinely believe was an extremely robust and professional selection process. I think that's very important for the new Chief Officer, as I experienced some years ago, to start with a stronger leadership platform for their step into becoming the Chief Fire Officer of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Services. I'd like to thank all of the candidates. There were a number of candidates that came through the process, which created a very strong field, and all of those candidates, I know, put themselves forward and put a huge amount of work and effort into presenting themselves in whichever stage of that process they reach. And I share with the Chairman my thanks to Jeff for presenting himself, putting himself forward, and putting such a professional presentation together at the selection process last week. I'm equally pleased as the Fire Authority to hand over to Neil Odin as your and mine as a member of the public after Christmas Chief Fire Officer. Neil has worked with me over the last 4 or 5 years, 6 years maybe, and I am proud that he has come through the process to be your new Chief Fire Officer, and also I'm extremely, and I say it with some passion and conviction, extremely confident that Neil will not only take forward the service to new horizons and take it in a generally the same direction, particularly culturally, which I think we share aspirations of the culture that we want to see and be part of. But I'm also equally confident that he'll put his own mark on being the Chief Fire Officer and take it in the direction, and he has the confidence and the capability to do that. And so in every way, I'm pleased for him, I'm pleased for the service, and I'm pleased particularly for the public of Hampshire, who will continue to get an exemplary service under his leadership. Thank you, Chairman. Neil.
Neil, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Chief, for those kind words. Firstly, as you can imagine, I'm past the it's sinking in now. I'm in a phase of adaptation to realising between now and the 31st of December about the role that I'll take on. Now, clearly, I'm honoured and proud to be considered and to be supported by yourselves during the selection process to be the next Chief Officer. I thank you for your faith and support in that. I'll do a job that will be your advisor and the Chief Officer to this great service. So I look forward to starting that in earnest. The interim very much is about supporting you in this meantime as a Deputy Chief and my team around me. A huge thanks to my team around me, the Director's team, and indeed to Jeff also. And the support and the competition and all that in good faith, and we've kept the organisation running in a fantastic way in the meantime. So I'm really grateful for the team for doing that, despite the distractions that can be caused by a selection process. So I not only look forward to supporting you as the authority, and I think that's going to be a really interesting journey we've got ahead of us, but I look forward to supporting this great and leading this great organisation. And some of you sat on the panel have heard some of my thoughts about that, and I look forward to sharing those with the rest of you in the coming months. In the meantime, I hope to get some conversations in with you all to understand your own aspirations and needs on the authority, and I'm looking forward immensely to the new year where we can begin our new journey into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. This appointment comes at an incredibly important time for the authority and the fire service here in Hampshire. Members, any of you wish to make any other comments? Anyone say anything?
I'm here in December.
Do you want to say anything about it?
No, I am here.
I don't think so at this particular point. I think that
My comments were actually made to Neil after the appointment being, as I sat on the appointment, and regarding Dave, I think we will have another opportunity to make any comments which we may wish to make at that time. So I'll leave that sort of open until the next meeting. And the only point that I would, I suppose, emphasise is that the point that you made, and that is the standard of the candidates that were actually put forward, and the presentations put forward by all of them, was extremely good, and it was interesting to hear their different aspirations of the way forward, etc. And it was difficult. We had to make a decision, and unfortunately only one can win and one doesn't.
Thank you, Roger. The only other comment I'd make is that I was privileged to watch all of the command assessment process. That was incredibly challenging. It really was. I will be writing out to everybody who facilitated that, and I'd just like to acknowledge the work that Andy Bowers did. Well done, Andy, for really putting the candidates through the grinder there. You really did really well.
I'd also like to thank Andy.
Right.
Chris, before we move off the appointment, I mean, one of the things which did come out was the large number of people that were actually involved in the whole process. And I think that number ought to come out, because it actually, to be quite honest, astonished me that the number of people that were involved in some way or another in the whole process of getting to where we are today.
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that, Roger. There were. Andy had a team of probably over 50, something like that. So, yes, I will, on behalf of the authority, be writing to everybody and the stakeholder panels, and there were so many people involved, probably over 100 altogether. So,
100 was actually quoted, so...
yes, I'm sure it was. Yes, yeah. I wouldn't have liked to have had to endure that myself. Right, so moving on the agenda, we now move to the minutes. You've got two sets of minutes. I will take... I wish to take the minutes of the 15th of September first, and then we'll come back to the other meetings. So, have you all got a copy of the minutes of the meeting? This was an extraordinary meeting of the full authority that was held on the 15th of September, immediately prior to the Standards and Governance meeting. The reason for that meeting was that two members of the appointments panel for the new Chief Fire Officer were unable to attend. So we had to arrange replacement members. And thank you to Councillor Vaughan and Councillor Chad, who volunteered and took part in that process. The reason why we had to do it was because it was the full authority that set up that appointments panel, and it could be it could only be the full authority that made a change. So you've got those minutes there, and it just in effect summarises what I've just explained to you. So you happy to accept those minutes? Everybody agree? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. An important part of this whole process, the recruitment meeting that took place, the selection process that took place last Friday. We've been discussing here the appointment of a new Chief Fire Officer for Hampshire, but it's not just Hampshire, it's the Isle of Wight as well. So it is important to acknowledge that we had, as part of the panel, Councillor Gary Peace from the island, and he contributed significantly to the whole process on the day. So I'd like it recorded in the minutes, please, that we acknowledge the support of the Island Council in the appointment from the 1st of January of their new chief officer for the Isle of Wight Fire Service. Right, thank you for reminding me that day. So we've accepted the minutes of the 15th of September. So now if I can ask you please to return to the minutes of the 25th of July. I'm pressing the signpost. Oh, here we are. Right. So, everybody with me? You've all got your minutes up, have you? So, the first matter arising is para 21, which is Grenfell Tower fire, where, if you recall, at the last meeting, we agreed to set up a cross-party working group to review the position with regard to the planning process and to consider options. And I will invite Rob Cole to give us an update as to what has happened and where we're going. And if you're able to, Rob, it might be helpful if you could just briefly advise members of what has happened this week in Southampton with regard to Canberra Tower. I was advised you were going to take a seat over there. Is that?
I squeezed in here in the end.
You're okay there.
Yeah.
You?
It's a slim.
All right. Okay. All right. So over to you.
Okay, good morning everyone. I'll start with the recommendation around Grenfell that falls out of item 21 there. So during the July Fire Authority meeting, it was recommended that the Fire Authority developed a position statement that clearly illustrates the authority's view with regards to building regulations and legislation. The Fire Authority aspire to influence at government level the Fire and Rescue Service's ability to be involved as statutory consultees at the planning application stage of major residential applications, at the change in use or conversions to residential accommodation where the fire safety order will apply, at the planning of major refurbishment of residential accommodation where the fire safety order will apply. To influence a change in the Fire and Rescue Service's involvement and the inclusion of fire safety as a statutory consultee will require an amendment to the National Planning Policy Framework. A working group consisting of HFRS officers and Fire Authority members has been established to progress a position statement to include the areas I've just mentioned. The working group will report back to the authority with a final position statement for approval at the December's Fire Authority meeting. Are there any questions regarding that before we move on to the next piece?
Members, this isn't an opportunity for full debate, but I do appreciate not all of you were a part of that working group. So I think it's appropriate that if you have any items relating to this, we seek clarification on. Now's the opportunity to ask Rob your questions. So please feel free to ask.
I'll ask if I may, Mr. Chairman. If we can now be consulted on major developments, does that mean we can insist on wider roads that fire engines can actually get down and where people can't park on the side of the road to stop them?
That would be one of the areas that we'll be looking at influencing at that central government level. We already are a consultee for access and water supplies, so we already are consulted in those areas. And as long as we can make access at all reasonable times, then that gets passed through. But the piece that we're trying to influence is a much wider piece that we are involved at a much earlier stage in that planning application.
I think that's where I was coming from, Mr. Chairman. The problem I have is that I've got a lot of areas where I have complaints that emergency vehicles can't go down the road. Now, this is historical. but I watch new estates going up and I can see the same problems being repeated, that we're going to get on-street parking, and that as soon as you start doing that, we're going to have the emergency vehicles having a problem getting down roads, taking out wing mirrors or just removing the cars. It's just something I wondered if we can get a greater input in and say we need this amount of space.
Just to say that if there's particular circumstances in your own area, Councillor, then obviously we'll pick up on those outside the meeting and pursue those with the local authority and our own consultation process. Thank you.
Yes, and in that respect, if any of you who are not part of this working group feel that there's something you would like to contribute to it, well, please feel free to send a message into Rob, and he'd be very pleased to receive that. Yeah, Roger, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I think that the main thrust of what this is all about is that at the moment the service is consulted through building regs on some of the issues. But the point being is that planning local authorities consider a planning application, and we want to get in at that point so that the service is consulted at that point, and that's the importance of getting the legislation changed in the National Planning Framework, because that would then give the planning authorities the right to refuse a planning application, having consulted the fire service, and then the fire service saying that it isn't fit for purpose because of X, Y, and Z. It gives the planning authority then the right to refuse it. In the situation we have now, the planning committees cannot refuse because they're not consulting, it's not in the NPPF. So that's the point that we're trying to get in. And on the basis of the Grenfell Tower situation, the Minister said he was open to looking at any ways forward for the future, and therefore that's why we're looking at this and taking it forward.
Yes, you and I were at the meeting where the Minister asked for that input, didn't he? Sharon, some of this has come about by this silly situation with the property here in Southampton, so I don't know whether you want to add anything.
Yes, I mean, during the last municipal year, there was a prohibition order slapped on a student hall of residence because of the design, ventilation issues, and also the location of the kitchen. There was a meeting held between myself, our head of planning, and Stu Adamson, who was then doing a different job to the one he's doing now. And there is a memorandum of understanding on all purpose-built student accommodation. Any planning application that goes in, the developers are told, talk to the Fire and Rescue Service first. We did pass a motion a couple of weeks ago today, actually, in Southampton, along these lines, the lines of the position statement, although not all of it. And we will voluntarily now be operating that in Southampton. But I think it's be worth pursuing this with the Minister, because at the moment local authorities are not legally obliged to do that, whereas if it's a statutory thing, it's going to make it safer, and it would apply across the board for not just the residents of Southampton, but everywhere. So.
Thank you. Members, anybody got any other questions for Rob on that side of things? No? Okay. Right, Rob, can I come back to you just for a few words of what is happening now in Southampton? Because I know you've been there advising the city, haven't you, about Canberra Towers, which some of you may know, some of you may well have seen the Inside Out programme. I was unable to watch it, but it was been on TV this week.
Okay, so you may be aware there was a programme called Inside Out, which was aired on BBC One on Monday night, on the 2nd of October, which detailed some issues related to fire safety in the Canberra Towers high-rise property down at Western Shore in Southampton. The areas that were mentioned within the programme regarding fire doors were previously identified by Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service during a recent inspection post-Grenfell Tower fire that was carried out with Southampton City Council colleagues, and they were in attendance and carrying out some support in that area. We also backed that up with writing to Southampton City Council. HFRS attended the Southampton City Council CMT meeting Tuesday morning to confirm the inspection results and to answer any questions regarding Canberra Towers. HFRS will continue the good working relationships that we do have with Southampton City Council, with both organisations dedicated to ensure fire safety is maintained with all residential blocks and providing reassurance to the residents of those blocks.
Fine. Thank you for that, Rob. Yes, sure.
You're probably aware that we are currently retrofitting sprinklers in 3 of our blocks, the 3 scissor blocks. The next 3 that will be having the sprinklers retrofitted, and the work will be starting before the end of the year, are Millbrook and Redbridge Towers over on the west side of the city, and Canberra Towers over sort of on Western Shore.
Thank you, Sharon. And from a Portsmouth point of view, Frank, there's been an announcement that the cladding is going to be removed by early next year now, I think, isn't it?
That's correct.
Yes. Good. Right. Thank you. Right. We're still on the minutes then. Oh, dear. I have to keep putting my password in. So that was para 21. Does anybody have... Oh, and I've forgotten something on the minutes. Right back at the beginning, the minutes say that Councillor Ros Chad was present at the meeting, but she's pointed out to me that she'd given apologies. That's correct, isn't it? So that needs to be corrected, please, Kevin. So anything else on the minutes from that meeting of the 25th of July? All content? No true record? Okay. Right, so we accept those minutes then, and I will duly sign those in due course. Thank you. Right, moving on to item 4, deputations. We have none. Moving on now to item 5, Chairman's announcements. I apologise, I've got 1 or 2 things to tell you. First of all, we have an urgent item. Hopefully you've all received the paper, which will be item 13 on the agenda today, relating to the position of Deputy Chief Fire Officer with effect from the 1st of January. So you've all got that paper, I hope. So we will consider that later in this meeting. So, other announcements. First of all, it's with great sadness that we learnt of the passing of firefighter Martin McGeechan. Martin began his career with the Isle of Wight in April 1999 at Ventnor, before being appointed to be a firefighter at St Mary's in Southampton in 2001. But he continued with RDS duties on the island, and then made a decision to transfer back to the island whole time in 2007. Martin's funeral took place on the island on the 8th of September and was attended by the Chief Officer and a number of service colleagues. Thoughts are with his family and friends. Also, we did mention at the last meeting the sad passing of our colleague, Councillor Frank Pearce. I can advise you that I attended his funeral on the 21st of July, along with the Chief Officer and Tom Sims, and it was a really well-attended funeral. Some of you may recall that Frank, both here and at the County Council, was referred to as Mr. Hayling, and that really came up at his funeral on a number of occasions. Oh,
It's just a fire alarm test.
is this a test?
Just a test, 11:30.
I'm told that was a test.
That was a test. Yeah.
Just to test us. So, I was advising you about Frank Pearce's funeral. So, and also, it's sad to inform you that one of our fire service fire dogs, Saxon, has passed away. And that was on the 11th of... Oh, sorry, I've got the wrong name. No, two dogs, Saxon and Inca. Oh, yes. Right, so Saxon passed away on the 11th of August and Inca on the 8th of September. Oh, how sad, both of them died. So these were two Labradors that retired after a number of years' service between them, having attended more than 500 operational incidents. And our thoughts are with the owner, Graham, and his family and friends. How sad that they both died. I wonder whether one died because the other one had died. It sometimes happens, doesn't it? So, moving on. National pay negotiations. I think we discussed this briefly earlier on this morning. FBU members continue to consult with the National Joint Council proposals on firefighter pay. Negotiations will be ongoing, but whilst these discussions continue, the national employers have suggested that the NJC agree to uplift salaries across the board now by 1%, including continual professional development payments backdated to the 1st of July this year. A response has not yet been received. HMIC FRSU update. That's a bit long-winded, but it's about the inspectorate. And we did mention this at the last meeting. The Home Office have announced that the inspection of fire and rescue services will be carried out by the newly named HMIC FRS. There is a formal launch on Tuesday, the 10th of October in central London. I will be there to represent you. This introductory event will give chief fire officers, chairs of authorities and police and crime commissioners the opportunity to meet and to hear about the early plans for inspecting fire and rescue services and to help with developing the inspection methodology. We have already had a meeting with Matthew Parr, who came here. He only recently retired from the Royal Navy. When I say recently, 2016, so it's only just a year ago. He was a Rear Admiral, and he, well, we look forward to meeting him for a high-profile gentleman. So we'll certainly look forward to meeting him and his team when they come back here. Now, that does remind me, in mentioning there that the PCC will be present at that meeting. Of course, I should have taken apologies. I should have mentioned apologies from the PCC at the beginning of our meeting. So I need to take a step back and record that, please, Kevin, because the PCC did speak to me last week and about the agenda today, and was unsure whether he would be able to attend, because I think he's on the Isle of Wight today. Well, he thought he might have to be on the Isle of Wight, but I just left it, come if you're able to. So.
Chairman, on that particular point,
Yeah.
it does seem that this is I think the second meeting where the PCC hasn't attended, when we've already extended an invitation to him to attend.
Oh, no.
And I think it's a great pity, and I would certainly like to record it's a great pity that he is not attending so as to have an input in from the police side as well.
Okay.
I find it very disappointing.
Well, okay, I hear what you say. I did say to him, well, if you're unable to come, would you like to invite your new deputy to attend? And he said, yes, I would, but I'm unable to do that because she's not officially appointed until this Friday. So we would have had the deputy if she'd been officially appointed. But I understand what you're saying.
Chairman, can I just clarify then?
Yeah.
If we agreed to include the Crime and Police Commissioner, and we're just really waiting for the government to actually change the legislation to allow that person to be a formal member of the Fire Authority, if he or she, whoever it might be, can't attend, does that mean in the future they could send their deputy? Or will the changes in the Act which we've been looking at just apply to the Commissioner himself?
There has been some discussion about this. If the deputy attends, it would be in a non-voting capacity, and I made that clear to Michael, although we haven't got to that position, but I'll invite Paul to comment here.
We've been in some discussion with the Home Office about, because this has been one of the outstanding items for the Home Office to determine before proceeding with amending our combination order, is their policy over to what extent PCCs can delegate attendance at fire and rescue meetings. And the Home Office position now has crystallised into the Police and Crime Commissioner himself or herself will be the only member from the PCC who can vote at a fire and rescue meeting, but they can, under their powers under the Policing and Crime Act, they can delegate attendance to someone else, but not in a voting capacity. So the only vote would come from the PCC, him or herself. Now that's out the way. Hopefully now they will sort of lay the new order before Parliament in the near future, enabling the PCC to become a formal member.
Right. Thank you, Paul. Right, moving on with my announcements. UCRO, United Kingdom Rescue Organisation 2017. This took place in Hull on the 8th, 9th of September, hosted by Humberside Fire and Rescue Service. Area Manager Jason Avery attended the challenge as the UCRO lead for USAR. Teams representing Hampshire in a usual and positive way. And after 2 days of intense competition, the Hampshire team once again returned with an array of awards, including Best USAR Medic, Best Trauma Team, Best Place in the Overall Team Award. I think that's an exceptional performance. And I hope you all picked up my message that I sent out to Jason and asked him to convey it to all of the team. Because to get the overall Victor Ladorum Award for the overall team award is quite exceptional, because that means every team member has really had to contribute to that. So I think that was exceptionally well done. I'm sure you all agree with me. Jason, did you want to say anything quickly about? One other thing I would say, because it was here last time, and I can't remember what we achieved, but last time. But I can remember whoever the Humberside chief is, he said to me, well, the real HFRS is going to win next year. And that's what he said to me.
And they did. Us.
Yes, yes.
I can remember him saying that.
Yes,
Posing,
yes,
yeah.
yes. You got anything you want?
Thank you, Chairman. I think you've covered most of the points, but needless to say that the team will be entering next year. We'll have to defend their title, and as the UCRO lead for USAR, I'm really encouraging the team to do so, but also have to remain relatively independent to encourage other teams to come in and compete equally. But I'm sure we'll still hold on to the title for next year.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Jason, and well done to the team for success in Humberside. The Chief Officer of Humberside was exactly right. HFRS did win this year, the best one, and we're pleased to take that award. What I'd like to impress upon you is linkage with other things, really. A team goes up, is incredibly successful in a national competition. It links with the later paper on the academy here and developing our own staff, and the expertise from that team, you be assured, is being fed back into the academy, which means that all of our firefighting capability in Hampshire benefits from that expertise. And it also links with service delivery redesign. One of the elements of our service delivery redesign, which Neil will come on to, is about moving the USAR capability onto the front line of the service. And I know that in recent incidents, that USAR capability has been used, as it wouldn't have done in the past, for complex, difficult, particularly road traffic collisions. And we're seeing the outcome of that expertise at a national award being brought back through the academy on the front line, helping save lives within Hampshire. I just want to make that linkage for you in your minds. But well done to the team. Excellent.
Yes, thank you for that, Dave. And an important thing to emphasise here is it's a whole learning process, Jason, isn't it? With the teams from across the nation learning off each other and swapping ideas. And whilst Hampshire did well, the other teams would have been looking at what we were doing, and they're learning from what we've done. So, we hope we do as well next year, but we'll have to fight hard again, I expect. Yes, good. Where, sorry?
Next year it's in South Wales, and we're already starting to prepare for the challenge and support in South Wales for 2018.
I seem to recall that Wales did well here last year, didn't they?
Yeah, that's correct. South Wales seemed to excel in the vehicle extrication challenge, so again, we'll be competing up against them next year because Hampshire has a sound record on that sort of discipline as well.
Well, we look forward to hearing about that next year.
Mr. Chairman, although you have actually written to the teams, which is right and proper, can we actually record in our minutes the authorities, thanks to all the work they've done and how they've flown the Hampshire flag and won?
Yes, thank you. Right, I've still got announcements to go, so moving on. Future fire governance options appraisal. My thanks to Councillors Mintoff, Stubbs and Price, who along with myself spoke with consultants KPMG, who've been undertaking work regarding the future options of fire governance. I also attended a meeting on the 26th of September to discuss progress on this work. KPMG's report is being drafted, but they did not present any detail at this stage. Outcomes and findings of the report will be reported back to the full authority. It is anticipated that this will probably be in early 2018. I don't think there's anything further we can add to that at this stage. Also to advise you, we had a civic visit here just last week when we had the Mayor of Eastleigh. When was it? 20. How could I forget that it was when all the selection process was going on? We had a civic visit at the same time. Yes, it was the Mayor of Eastleigh with a number of fellow mayors and chairmen from across Hampshire, and it was we had a stakeholder event here for them, and it went very well. And I've had feedback from those that were here to say how much they enjoyed the visit. So congratulations to all the team here that facilitated that event. Now, also to tell you, some of you may have, travelling in today, may have had Radio Solent on. It was quite early, but you may have heard Andrew Ibney speaking about his challenge to support the firefighters' charity, and he's started today cycling with his family from Portsmouth to London. Andrew is a young man who is autistic, and he's challenged himself to visit all the fire stations in the land, and he's some way to achieving that. I think he's visited over 1,000. He has the support of Andy Bowers in this, and if you look at the news online, you will see that there's a very nice photograph of Andrew and Andy in front of appliance number 32, which is an Eastleigh appliance. Exceptionally good photograph of Andy. So, Andy, do you want to just tell us a little bit more about...
Andy's had to leave.
Where is he?
Andy's had to leave for personal
Oh, he was
reasons.
sitting over there.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, he can't. So I've said it for him.
Maybe I'll make a comment.
Yes.
Just on behalf of the service, we congratulate Andrew on his efforts. He is a good friend of Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service and has raised the profile of his own condition, but also lots of money for the firefighters' charity over many years. I'm rather surprised he's not sat here actually as your new chief fire officer. He was a strong competition, but Neil just about won out on that one. But our congratulations, we wish him well, to him and his family, on the latest challenge, cycling to London. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I have met Andrew a number of times, and he's an honorary firefighter of New York as well, and he was speaking about that this morning on the radio. But you did have made for him a special chief fire officer's uniform to fit him, and he enjoys wearing it, I know. Right, so thank you for that. Myself off. Right, I think that probably concludes. That's enough from me. There was an awful lot there. Now we move on to member development and comments that you may have of events that you may have attended. I'm sure it has not escaped your attention that last week was National Inclusion Week, among other things happening here last week. I was able to take part in just a couple of events. On Tuesday, I could listen into Inclusion for Organisational Success, and then on Wednesday evening, I listened to a presentation entitled Man Up by students from Itchen College, which was incredibly powerful. It dealt with the issue of male suicide, which sadly is among young men up to, I think, late 30s, is the highest cause of death. Absolutely incredible. I wasn't aware of that. It was a really hard-hitting production, which used the language appropriately, which would be relevant to young men suffering in a way that drives them to take that sad decision. So that was well received. Now there was a national event also run by the LGA, and Ros, Chad, you attended that on behalf of the authorities, so perhaps you've got something you can tell us about there.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add, yes, I went to the LGA Inclusion and Diversity Masterclass that was held. We spoke a lot about tackling an unconscious bias for inclusion and inclusive leadership. an inclusive leadership on the day. It was well attended by a number of other authorities, and I will be passing on everything that I have got and all my notes onto Leanne for her team to go through. But I won't say anything else in the interest of time.
Can I just clarify, was that, you got some information there for the authority, but this is all about the fire service. So is there something because we have a people committee here, which is dealing with these sort of issues. I mean, have we got something to input to the committee?
Yeah, I will be meeting with Leanne to discuss the
right, that's good.
that I have
That's good.
for her.
Good. And you reminded me of something there in talking about National Inclusion Week. I should, of course, have acknowledged the work of Leanne in putting all this together, and I'd like that recorded in the minutes. Okay, right. Has anybody got anything else they wish to comment on? Anything they wish to say at this stage? Anything? You've been somewhere, Roger, surely, haven't you?
No, not because our last Fire Authority meeting was 25th of July. I've not been anywhere since then outside of the organisation. We've done many events within the organisation, but not outside. The only one which is pensions, which is really very dear to, I think, all firefighters, is the changes and what have you. And I think the area which is changing there at the moment is the pensions, it's not the Ombudsman, it's the pensions nationally, is that are looking at all pensions administrations across the country, whether it's private or public, and they're trying to make sure that everybody does do what they should be doing. Statements are sent out on time, and they're looking for examples of trying to prosecute or to fine people for not actually complying. Within the fire service as a whole nationally is that I think we are doing extremely well. In the last couple of years, the sending out of statements, etc., I'm talking nationally, not talking locally, is drastically improved. And I think last year, I think it was something like 98% was achieved on time and complied. So I know in Hampshire we do comply, and we have complied with, but it's a matter from the Pensions Committee of making sure the administration is doing what it should be within the legislation, because otherwise I think that the pensions fund would be, well, not pensions fund, the pensions, I'm not sure who would pay the fine, but because there's not a pensions pot like there is within the county sort of pension fund, so I don't know where that would come from. But we have to be on top to make sure that it's all being complied with, and I'm pleased to report that as far as Hampshire is concerned, we are very much on top of it.
Thank you. Well, we've got the minutes of the Standards and Governance meeting coming up later, and that does include a report from the Pensions Board. Okay. Anybody got anything else to comment on, report on? Right. All right. Thank you. So we can now move on to item 7, which is medium-term financial plan. It's switched itself off again here. Excuse me. Right. I'm back on. Rob.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, members. By way of introduction, I think you've heard me talk in the past that what we said we would do for this update of the medium-term financial plan was to sort of include everything that we could possibly think of. So in terms of costs, provisions, revenue contributions to capital, but also to build in a little bit around the sort of favourable side, particularly around the council tax base. So happy to take questions at the end, but I'm going to just take you through a few key points. So if I can ask you to go to paragraph 16, just to remind you there that we've got a table of expected grant reductions. So to 2019-20, we have provisional figures from the government, and we don't expect those to change up until that point, because you'll remember we submitted an efficiency plan, which was accepted by the government, which effectively gave us 4-year figures. And then we've just come up with, for 2021, an assumed reduction of 10%. And then for 21-22, we extended the forecast this time. We've put in another 5%. So I think that probably errs on the side of prudence. I mean, we hear that austerity is over, but clearly it is not, and therefore I think it's the right thing to continue to assume that we will receive grant reductions into the future. So our forecasts are based on that. Paragraph 18. So we will continue to assume throughout the whole of the period of the MTFP that we will increase council tax by 1.99%, so up to the referendum limit. But in 19, as I say, what we've done is to also add in an element of growth in the council tax base. Now, being a very prudent accountant, I don't normally do that because it gives us a little bit of flexibility in the future. But I think based on the sorts of figures that we've seen in the past, which have actually been as high as 1.8%, I think building in 0.5% a year is probably right for the forecast, but it still errs on the side of prudence, which I think has been favourable to us so far. So a little bit extra, which obviously over the whole period of the medium-term financial plan gives us recurring income of about £800,000 a year. So it's not insignificant. So just moving down to paragraph 25. So unusually this year, one of the things that we have done within the service is to ask the heads of service team to put forward any potential growth bids to include within the budget. Those then went through a sort of an internal process of review and challenge, and what you see in Appendix E is effectively what's left. Now we call them growth bids, but actually for every single one, it represents the continuation of a role which is currently temporary. So it's temporarily funded, and what we're saying within this medium-term financial plan is that we can't really foresee a position where we won't need those roles in the medium term, and therefore we're asking for those to be formally built into the base budget. As I said at the start, the other thing that we said that we would look at was trying to make sure that by the time we get to 21-22, the service has got everything that it needs in order to be properly equipped and kitted out to run an excellent service. So what we've done is to add in 500,000 in 19-20, rising to 750, and then £1 million for equipment and IT replacement. So we'll effectively, to smooth out the profile of spend, we'll just make a provision each year in the accounts that will be put into a reserve, and we'll spend that when we need it. So significant investment there in sort of future equipment replacement. And then in 28, you'll see that we've also allowed for £350,000 for annual repairs and maintenance. So elements of that would be planned maintenance in order to reduce the levels of reactive maintenance on our properties, and also £75,000 per annum for vehicle maintenance. The latter of those really is catching up with the position that we have seen over the last few years. So effectively the budget hasn't kept pace with the sorts of levels of spend that we've been seeing. So I think it's important that we do the vehicle maintenance provision. For the property maintenance, I'm a bit less convinced, and you'll see in the report there that I've suggested that we review that as part of the budget setting process. Obviously, for everything that we build in at this stage, it adds to the target that we've got to meet from savings. And I think as a service, we probably ought to be looking at the priority of that 350,000 compared to the things that we would need to stop doing in order to meet it. So I think we need to just sort of look at that balance as we move forward to the budget setting process.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask Rob what he's just said is that vehicle maintenance under paragraph 28, it says estate and vehicle maintenance are also areas which have been underfunded for a number of years. And it gives the impression that we're not really forgetting the property side, but we've not been maintaining our vehicles. Now, as far as I'm concerned, we've been maintaining our vehicles to a very high standard compared with a lot of authorities. And they are in good condition and kept in good condition. And particularly as that they have to be driven at speed, this might give the wrong message to people that we're not maintaining our vehicles. Now, I'm convinced that's not the case.
You're entirely right. So we do maintain our vehicles to a very high standard. As a result of maintaining them to a very high standard, we've effectively been overspending the budget by £75,000 every year. So effectively what we've got is a level of spend which is not matched by the budgetary provision. And what we're saying is that we should align that from 18-19 onwards.
So what do you actually mean by underfunded then? Because
in as much as that the budget does not match the level of spend. So I think it's, yes, probably not the correct word. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
On the property side, I think it's a little less clear because effectively you could spend an awful lot of money on property, bringing it up to a gold standard, and there is therefore more of a balance to be struck. So I think some work has been done internally to look at what would give us the best level of provision in order to make sure we have a very well maintained estate, which I also believe we do already, compared to a lot of other authorities. But I do think that's one that we need to just review in the context of that wider piece around potentially having to make savings there.
Going back a page to page 15, about sort of income, two questions. Do we still receive the national non-domestic rate? I can't remember what it's called.
Business rates.
Business rates, that's it. Do we still get that?
Yep.
Is that likely to continue in the in the medium-term future? And also, I believe that Hampshire did, and I know that we did in Southampton this year. We raised our council tax by sort of the 1.99 plus the social care precept. So, does the income from council tax, does that help? That increase, the social care precept, does it have any bearing on what the fire authority gets?
So, yep, just to answer both of those. So for business rates, yep, we receive locally retained business rates. So we keep 1% of all of the business rates earned within Hampshire, which equates to about 6.5 million. But we also receive a business rates top-up grant from the government of about the same amount, about another 6.5 million. So in total, we receive 13 million. You'll recall there have been discussions as part of the 100% business rate retention project, which is effectively on hold at the moment, but was due to come in for 2019-20, about removing fire authorities from that mechanism in the same way that police are not funded through business rates. So we responded to say we actually thought that was quite a good idea, but that has yet to be decided. In terms of council tax, the council tax that Southampton City Council levies purely goes to the unitary authority. So the extra in terms of the social care precept would have gone to Southampton. Obviously, we levy our own precept at 1.99%, which is then applied across the whole of Hampshire. So people's bills within Southampton will include that element of increase just for the Fire and Rescue Authority.
I don't think I made it clear. I mean, obviously, our council tax base has gone up as a result of that increase. So does that rise in the in the base level of?
So when I refer to the council tax base, I mean the number of properties upon which council tax is levied. So any increase in the number of properties in Southampton that are paying council tax, yes, we would benefit from that. Just moving on. So paragraph 29, we talk there about pay, as the chairman has already said. So quite a lot going on nationally around that. So it's a slightly more difficult one for us to predict than it has been in previous years, where it's been pretty much 1% every year. So what we've done within the MTFP from 18-19 onwards is to put in a general provision of 2.5%, which is there both to reflect any potential national increases, but also anything that we might want to have a look at locally. So we'll see what develops on that, but obviously some of the calls for the increases have only been on the basis that the government funds it. Whether we're likely to see that or not, I'm not sure, but so we'll have to wait until the budget at the end of November to find that out. So taking all of that into account at paragraph 30 effectively gives us a revised budget deficit by 21-22 of £3.4 million. So that takes into account all of the savings that we've made to date, phase 1, 2 and 3. So effectively we'd be looking at developing a new savings or income generation programme that achieves that gap by 21-22. Also within the budget, in addition to the additional revenue contributions we've made for equipment, we've also increased our figure for revenue contributions to capital up to the 3.9 million. And you'll remember that we've been looking to do that as a strategy over the last 5 or 6 years because the government cut our capital grant. So within this strategy, we've built that into the full level. So in terms of the profile of the savings that's required, whilst we talk about a figure of 3.4 million by 21-22, obviously that savings profile varies as we go through the years. I'm not too worried about that profile, simply because of the fact we have now built in effect, over £5 million worth of revenue contributions to reserves, etc., which we can vary those downward if necessary in order to balance the budget. So I think we're in a very strong position in terms of our financial position going forward, as long as we've got ahead of the curve again. We've now got quite a significant amount of time to develop a savings programme by the time we get to 21-22. So just come down to paragraph 45, so that's just dealing with the forecast for the current year. So at the moment we're looking at a net underspend of about 1.1 million, made up of savings in employee costs, some of which are as a result of deliberate strategy of making reductions as part of service delivery redesign, and then a slight overspend. It's not really an overspend, it's a deliberate delay in the implementation of the ICT programme. So we weren't ready to go, so we've delayed putting that in, which has cost us £200,000. But I think it's a good news story. So effectively, those changes that we have made to the ICT setup will generate savings of £800,000 a year. But effectively, we've only made a part year in 2017-18. And finally, just turning to the recommendations, I don't normally give a dimension, but I will this time. So you do have the half-yearly report on Treasury management activities contained in Appendix D. So two things to draw to your attention there. You'll see within that, without wishing you to turn to it because it gets a bit complicated, particularly on these things. We've been implementing a strategy of higher yielding investments. So obviously our reserves are ultimately needed for the purpose of which they are intended over the medium term. However, we do believe that there is a core level of reserves which we can invest in slightly longer term products, and those are doing particularly well this year. So we have a pooled property fund which is earning us 4.49%, and we have a pooled equity fund which is earning a whopping 7.43%. So very, very favourable returns on our investments there. And then just leaving the best till last, because it's going to take a little bit of an explanation. Under paragraph 64, you'll see there's some recommendations there around something called MiFID. So this is changes to investment regulations which set out to try to protect certain types of users. Bizarrely, we're not entirely sure why, but public sector organisations have been deemed to be retail clients under this change in legislation. And effectively, a retail client is the same as you and me. So the government assumes that if you or I are investing in products, we don't really know what we're doing. And therefore, the individual companies that you are investing with have a responsibility to make it very clear the risks and everything that you are going into. And certain products aren't actually open to you to invest in. So for some reason, the public sector has been deemed to be a retail client with effect from the 3rd of January next year. So whilst that in theory gives us protections, those are protections which we don't have at the moment. So it's not like we're losing anything, but what we do lose is access to certain products which give us a very high return. So clearly we have individuals whose job it is to do this sort of stuff, and we have treasury management advisors who know all about this stuff, and therefore we think it is worth us taking the risk to opt up to what's called a professional client status, which is effectively where we are at the moment. So we'll continue as we are, but I am required to just sort of draw your attention to the fact that by moving from a client status to a professional status, that we are foregoing those extra protections that are being put in. So range of recommendations there to basically allow me to get on and apply for that professional status and to make any decisions that are required. So happy to take any questions, Chairman.
So does that mean that you won't be able to keep that 7% investment? Or
It exactly means that we will be able to keep that
We will be
7%
able to.
investment. Yeah. So
we will. Okay. Good. Members, any? Yes.
Essentially, what qualifications are the officers going to have to make sure we go to professional status, and how are you going to ensure with CPD that you keep those qualifications?
So we have a Treasury and Pension Fund team that look after all of, effectively, Hampshire County Council, Hampshire Constabulary, Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service, cash flow and cash management. They also look after the pension fund, which is a fund of 6 billion. So those are all qualified accountants, but as I say, we do also separately employ Arling Close, who you may not have heard of, but Arling Close predicted the Icelandic bank crash, and they went literally from a company of about 5 or 6 staff to suddenly being asked by the Treasury to come and advise them on public sector investments, and I think they are now well over sort of 200 staff, and they've probably picked up half of the public sector in the country in terms of Treasury advisors, and they give us updates on credit ratings, literally daily changes to things that are going on in the market. So I'd say we're probably more on top of that side of things than we've ever been.
So you think they're qualified?
They definitely are. And for what we pay them, so that 4% and that 7% would have been based on recommendations that they would have given us, and I won't divulge how much we pay them, but it is relatively low compared to what we earn. Well, now it's been called, isn't it?
Chairman, thank you, and thank you, Rob. Just to pick up on that point, I suppose, and to make Rob mentioned it, that capability and their expertise in CPD comes from our shared service arrangement, and I would suggest that if we weren't in a shared service arrangement which joins out Hampshire County, the Constabulary and ourselves, our own financial support, I think, would struggle to have that level of capability. And what that does for you as an authority is to make sure, as we've heard, that our investments are at the highest possible rate, and that the capability of the team managing our investments is of that standard. And I just want to reinforce in your mind another benefit shown of our shared service arrangement which supports the 3 partners. Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Just to pick up on that, so at the time that the shared service arrangement came into place, there were 4 finance staff that transferred from HFRA to the finance department. That team that looks after investments has got about 10 people in it.
Right. Thank you, Rob, for explaining all that to us. Members, any other points any of you wish to, any questions, anything you wish to ask? No? Okay, thank you. Can I then take you to page 21, where you've got extensive recommendations there. Are you happy to take those recommendations en bloc as one? All agreed? Thank you very much. So we've agreed item number 7 then. Thank you. So we now move to item 8, Service Plan Midterm Progress Report. And I'm delighted to welcome Nikki to present this paper. Over
Thank
to
you,
Nikki.
Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, so the current service plan that we have in place at the moment was approved by the authority in 2015, runs for 5 years. So this report provides members with a strategic overview and update on the progress we've made against the plan to date. So you'll see from the appendix there, a great amount of work has been done, many improvements achieved, and there are more planned as well. I would point out, though, in the report, although it's written per priority, so we have it, our progress per each priority, they are very interrelated and they're cross-cutting. As you can see, particularly in particular partnerships will run across all the priorities, but it's for ease of writing the report, it was written like that. The only other thing to mention is that we internally continually review forward, so we are continually reviewing to make sure that our plans continue to improve us and are fit for purpose going forward. We've already started looking beyond 2020 and we'll continue with that as well. So I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
So you've got 9 priorities there, Nikki, haven't you? So, is any members? Are you there on page 45 with the priorities? Have anybody got any points they wish to raise, please?
Could I make just a further comment?
Yes, sure.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just to say that Neil and the senior team from next year obviously decide how to take that forward with the authority and the service plan, which runs 2020 and looking further ahead, I'm sure, than that. This was important to me. As I step off as being Chief Officer at the end of the year, I've been working to you on a service plan which contains those 9 priorities. And it was important to me, and my thanks to Nikki, Sam particularly, and the knowledge management team within the service that have pulled together this sort of stocktake of where we are as a service against those 9 priorities. So this is a bit of a snapshot in time, and it's through their work we are able to present back to you where we are on that journey from 15 to 20 in terms of timeline, and what I deliver to you in my year as Chief Fire Officer on that progress. And then obviously Neil will talk to you, I'm sure, in the new year about where he wants to take the service and how he wants to revise that service plan in any shape or form. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you. As earlier on, I was excuse me, I was talking about the inspection that may come up next year. This is going to be so important as we move into that regime. So I'd like to echo your words, Dave, in thanking Nikki and her team, that Sam over there, that all the work that you've done for this. Right, members. Anybody wish to comment, ask a question? Okay, thank you. Can I take you then to page 46, where you've got the recommendation there at para 10, that the authority notes the progress made in delivering the service plan to date. All content with that recommendation? Thank you. So we now move to item 9, service delivery redesign. Kevin, you're going to have to teach me a quicker way to get to these things. I am there.
Come on, Kevin.
I am on number 9. It's all right. I'm on number 9, but it seems I'm going the wrong way about it, I think. But anyway, so right, Neil, you're going to present this paper, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And very similarly to the Chief, actually, as I step away from Director of Service Delivery, this is a very, very important phase for me to report back to you today on progress against the service delivery redesign. And members may recall, this is the implementation plan of risk review, which we went through some nearly 2 years ago now. So it's a long-term delivery plan to change some facets of the delivery of our service. Some of it you'll be more familiar with than others. But just, and I'll talk you through the paper in sort of chunks, if I may. So just reminding you of the kind of key priorities of the risk review programme were around not only making the savings which we were required to make and needed to make, but really focusing on operational effectiveness, making sure that our service genuinely improved as a result of us changing things, to improve firefighter safety and indeed the public safety. They're the kind of key messages and key focus of the project. And so we're measuring and watching very carefully as we start to adapt things. As I promised you during that time, we are keen to make sure we don't make any sudden changes that, one, can't be measured, but two, can't be predicted about the impacts on our communities and our firefighters. Very, very careful changes that we've adapted. So you'll see on paragraph 7 on page 60, there's a short update on new vehicles and equipment. As you can imagine from my teams on fire stations, it is the thing that they are most interested in. Really, really keen to make sure any new equipment and capabilities that we develop are done well. And as you also know, and promise I made during that opening stage of our delivery, was we intend to include and engage our people very closely. So that takes time, it takes effort, it takes long conversations to make sure that the equipment and vehicles are adapted with our people so their views are very much taken into account. So what I'm pleased to say so far is that we have our intermediate capability vehicles on the run, and they're at stations and proving very, very popular. And that's really having a very positive effect on people's belief in our new approach to developing equipment with them. The other level is the two first response capability vehicles have been piloted at a number of stations, 5 stations, and have enabled firefighters to think about the concept. And we'll continue to develop that concept as we go forward. So those 2 vehicles are now going to be positioned at Rushmore and into Southsea to develop a new crewing trial, which I'll talk about in a second. So the vehicles themselves, we've found some difficulties with parts of the vehicle, which will continue to improve, but equally we're looking at another vehicle also to give us a widest possible sense of how and which vehicles are best. So we are not yet at the final version. We continue to work with our teams, and in the future there'll be a procurement process anyway, so we'll go through to specify what that will be. But I'll report back to you again in the near future about how well that pilot's gone. Associated with that, as I said earlier, is the crewing systems. So particularly the whole-time crewing systems at Winchester and other places, at Gosport and others, are being piloted now. And I'm really pleased to say our teams have really engaged in that and created their own systems which are working so far very well. And yet, some are yet to actually implement them. But we've got a board watching that carefully to make sure any proposals that come up with are safe and effective. We measure the effectiveness of those and to make sure that they don't only suit the needs of our communities, they suit the needs of our firefighters, and they suit the needs of our organisation and what we're trying to deliver. So far, the culture and the ethos of our delivery and our changes is being done in the way we promised, with our people, not to them, and they're very much engaged in that journey, and we continue to encourage them to feed into that piece. Some of you may have seen recently comments in a Hampshire paper around our RDS crewing. It is a continual challenge for us to provide crewing, and some stations are harder to crew to than others. But I'd offer you some assurance today that this project is designed to meet that challenge. We've put in RDS support teams as a first measure, and we'll continue to work with our station and route commanders to give them the support they need to find the very best people. What I would say is our recruitment speed has massively increased. We've had a big improvement in recruitment speed for RDS firefighters, in as much as we were, I think, handling about 2 to 3, a month, and now we're up to 30. So really starting to get a turnover of new recruits in that area, which is really pleasing progress. So there's a comment there about also medical response and selective alerting, which is also part of our promise. That goes from strength to strength. And my thanks to the team for continuing to work with key partners in making sure we support their endeavours rather than going on our own new challenges. We are really much supporting South Central Ambulance Service and other health providers to make sure we reduce the burden on the NHS across the piece. So the key part also I mentioned earlier about savings. We've made our first tranche of savings, which has been reported in the medium-term financial plan. The first £970,000 has been taken out of the budget, which is a great start, and I'm grateful for the team, with no degradation of cover or response times. So we're very much focused on protecting those issues. And we focus on now 2 years' time for the next large tranche to come out of the budget. And that is the work we're doing now to make sure the crewing systems and others are successful and work before we take that money out of the budget. What that allows us to do, and in fact it requires us to do, is continue perhaps the efforts we've been working at in earnest to engage our teams. And if I could take you to paragraph 19, where inevitably there's resource requirements for this type of height of engagement. So what you already funded us to make sure the project started and got embedded, and we're very much on track. The early savings we're able to make from the new crewing approaches mean there's money available, but it requires us also to request from the authority further support to finish this approach off, to the tune of £780,000. So that money is not it's new money in terms of it hasn't been authorised yet by the authority, but it's money we're saving from the existing budgets. So it's kind of reusing the same money in a sense. So that's a request in the recommendations also, to allow us to finish through to 2019 and 2020 the approach we've taken, as in high engagement, high involvement of our teams, to make sure we get the very best outcomes from the changes that we bring. So there is a summary diagram or table on page 62 about the funding we've had so far, so you can see what we've spent so far and what on, and indeed the gap which now has emerged, or we predict to emerge, 1920 year. So that £780,000 would fill that gap and allow us to deliver a very wholesome project, and I know an effective, successful project. So I think I'll leave it there, and as much as to say, I obviously, as I move into my new role in the new year, I will not lose sight of this. Clearly, it's still my key responsibility to deliver. The service delivery team continue to play an excellent role in making sure that not only the deliverables are delivered, but we do it in such a way our workforce are engaged and are with us on this journey. So I'm happy to take questions at that point. Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, I've left that answer. Well, there's a very useful service delivery timeline on Appendix 1, isn't there, on page 65, which is useful. Can I just ask, I think it probably comes within this report rather than any other, about Basingstoke Fire Station, because I had some inquiry from local district council members up there as to what was happening, because they've seen appliances moving into the station and also some firefighters in there. And I did ascertain that the station will open officially, I think in probably the third week in January. But I think it'd be helpful just if we could have a bit of advice as to what is happening there.
Jeff will take.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Happy to take that one. Effectively, the build on the site was in two clear areas. The first was the complete rebuild of the station, and whilst the staff based at Basingstoke obviously couldn't use that, they were using the other buildings on site, and the plan will now be, as the crews move in and fully utilise the new station, the buildings that they were using, which is the second phase, will now be refurbished. So whilst the actual station is now handed over and being used, the site is still part of a building site. So we clearly didn't want to do any official openings whilst there's still building work going on the site, because that wouldn't make sense. So that piece of work will be completed towards the end of the year. We're leaving ourselves a little bit of space timing-wise in case there's any slippage, particularly as the weather starts to close in. And then there'll be a formal closure and handover of the site from the contractors to ourselves, after which we'll have the formal opening.
Thank you, Jeff. That was my understanding, and that was the message I passed on to the local people in Basingstoke. And I think it's probably going to be towards the late January, is it? Third week in January, possibly. But it will be a prestigious event. So I have been saying that, can we get a prestigious personage to open the station? I don't know whether we've made any progress with that.
We are working on it, and we'll keep you informed of.
I don't mean me. I mean the Lord Lieutenant or the High Sheriff or somebody.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we do have that in hand. Yes.
I've got 3 points. The first one is, following on from your point about Basingstoke, has all of the issues which were reported to us now been resolved regarding the building? So that's the first one. And I've got two questions which are totally different.
Yeah, the key issue is we wouldn't accept the building back until all the work was done to the correct quality in accordance with the plans, and we've been working hard with the contractors who have been cooperating with us to get it to the right standard. Effectively, we can move into the building. There is one minor item which is yet to be rectified, but you would expect something of that size and scale to have a few issues. That is being managed very carefully, and we're very close to the point of resolution. So to reassure the authority, we will make sure that we get the right quality of build as was required within the contract and the plans.
And obviously this is at no cost to us, and there may be compensation being paid to us for late delivery as well.
All those things are correct.
Right, my other question.
Any other point about Basingstoke? Is this on Basingstoke?
It is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
When it is opened, bearing in mind that we have former members of the Fire Authority who are in the Basingstoke area, will they be invited? And you can probably work out who I'm thinking about.
I can answer that. Yes, I've been in touch with Basingstoke members, and yes, they will be invited. Yes. Sorry, back to you, Roger, with your other queries.
The 2 points I wanted to make. One is to do under paragraph 7 is the FRC vehicles. All the vibes that I'm getting from firefighters is that those vehicles are spending an awful lot of time in workshops because they don't appear to be capable of doing what the service wants out of them. Therefore, are we going to be reconsidering the situation of the FRCs? Are we looking at other ways, or what are we going to be doing about that? That's the first question. And the second question links to the RDS in relationship to control room. Within that situation is that if I use my own local station, we had some problems with timings, and that got resolved. We now appear to have had another hiccup within the timing situation, which is, and the problem with all of this, doesn't take the vehicle off the run. It actually means that other appliances are called to a scene which is fairly close by to the station. Now, we had a problem with the morale, went down when we had the problem. It then went up and is dropping again. And I think the problem we may have within RDS is that if this is happening across the piece in other areas, morale within RDS, if they are not getting called as they should be called, or was originally called, then morale is going to go down, and that is going to have an effect upon the service. So I'd just like some answers about that.
Thank you. So dealing with the first, and we've had a conversation outside of this room, but I'm happy to continue that. Yes, I think it's fair to say that the 2 vehicles that we've got on pilot, and as many as other machines also end up in workshops with things broken on them. These 2, because they're pilot vehicles, some of the things we're using them for, they've not naturally been designed for, and therefore they're being adapted as we go. And one of the most important things to this pilot is that we iterate. At no point is anyone at risk, including our communities, but we want to try these 2 vehicles, and it's a make that we happen to have at the moment. Doesn't mean that will be the future make. We're certainly learning the things we're learning from its use. There's nothing like testing something in the field to make sure it works properly. And so we are absolutely listening to our people. We're not sort of saying this is the perfect thing and the final version. So we're very open-minded about that, and we'll see how that goes. It is a pilot, so we'll report back during this year to say how what we'll do and what the final sort of conclusions are made from that pilot phase. The next piece, the RDS, so there's a principle I'm sure the authority would support us with, which is mobilising the nearest and quickest appliance. And that's something which I would stand next to. The only time that that might not happen is currently under the terms of the small fire vehicle, which are not the same as the first response capability, I would add. It's a slightly older policy we've had where we'd send a smaller vehicle to a small fire. Now that eventually will phase out, and it is phasing out as a concept. So what happens currently sometimes is fire stations will see a small vehicle coming to deal with a small fire in their perceived area, and that can cause difficulties in terms of their morale. I do accept that. We'll find different ways of mobilising in the future, but happily take on this latest issue with you outside the room perhaps to try and resolve that. But it is something we are focused on, the nearest and quickest appliance being sent to the issue as it's needed, and I think that's the right thing to do. Okay.
Right. Thank you for that, Neil. Having, as I did myself, spent a long time serving in the reserve forces, I can fully appreciate the concerns that some RDS, because they sign up to serve, and then when they can't, it's a real frustration for them. But we have been able to use them on occasions. We deployed 2 crews to the island last year, I think, didn't we, with a serious fire, and they were absolutely delighted to be able to do that. And there's been another fire recently in the, remind me where it was, but RDS crew were deployed and actually dealt with it, didn't they, with the high pressure lamps.
Yeah, so it's a good point, Chairman. So we had a fire in Whitchurch recently where it was the first, if you like, full deployment of our SAVE concept. So the first attending response we used ultra-high pressure lamps, so the scanner, sack, vent, extinguish, the new approach to firefighting that we've started to develop. And it was the first fire that we've started at the beginning of that. So a lighter RDS crew turning up first, supported by then larger vehicles. And I think it's been a really good example of that starting to show that it can work. And our crews believing it and using it as a matter of preference. So that's really good news.
Right. Thank you, Neil. Members, any other points you wish to bring up? Any questions? Good. Okay. Thank you. So I'm looking for the recommendation. It's page 34. 64. Oh, no, sorry, you've got 2 recommendations, 34 and 35. Oh, there it is, page 64. So that the content of the report and the progress made to date be noted by the authority, that £780,000 of the approved efficiencies resulting from early underspends be allocated for continuation of the SDR programme. All agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right. You've been sat there, Becky, eagerly waiting. So, over to you. Item 10, please.
Thank you, Chairman.
Governance Review Improvement Plan.
Yeah, thank you. So this report seeks closure on the Governance Improvement Plan, which was created as part of the governance review of the authority, which took place last year. In June 2016, the authority approved the action plan, which contained specific actions which would lead to the improved efficiency and effectiveness of the authority. Many of the actions have now been completed by officers, which you will have seen specifically in the Constitution document, which you approved in June of this year. I have noticed that the appendix isn't actually included, so you don't actually have a copy of the plan. However, I can assure you that the actions have all been completed, and I understand from Kevin that we can include the plan afterwards and circulate them with the minutes. So if you're happy for us to approve the completion of the plan without the actual appendix, then I'd be grateful. Thank you.
I'm sure I had the appendix before, didn't I?
Yeah.
I apologise for not noticing that was...
Yeah.
Sorry, yes, it did come out in an earlier version, and, and it appears there's been something with the production that was only noticed this morning, so our apologies for that for members. And if you are content to approve closure of the plan, with the assurances that you've received from officers, we can do that. Clearly, if not, and you wish to see the plan before approving, we can defer that until you've had the opportunity to see the plan. But it has been completed in accordance with the work that you've done, and it has been overseen by members throughout.
Chairman, if I may, my thanks to Becky and Nikki previously in terms of the governance review, and this proposes to the authority the closure of that action plan, which I think has created a very efficient and effective fire authority to work with the service. So my appreciation for the work of both the authority and also Becky and Nikki in the past to do that. I refer you also to paragraph 9 on page 68. I think this is an important aspect going forward. We've talked about the involvement of the PCC in bringing a police perspective, political perspective into the authority. I think equally important, which was one of the actions of the plan, was to make a connection with the Council of Governors, which is the political coverage of South Central Ambulance. There was an action upon me in the plan to advance a conversation with Will Hancock, the Chief Executive of South Central Ambulance. That's led Becky and myself to have conversations with Lena Samuels, who is the chair of the Council of Governors. I'm pleased to say that Lena is coming to your next Fire Authority meeting in December to explain the Council of Governors and the political cover of South Central Ambulance. And then she is going to, I understand, sit and listen to your Fire Authority meeting. And I hope that that starts to form a political relationship between the Council of Governors of Ambulance and also the Fire Authority for Hampshire, because I think having connections between the blue light political governing bodies is a really healthy place to be, as we have done through our blue light executive of officers. So at officer level, at chief officer level, we have a blue light executive which looks at blue light collaboration, and you can replicate that in the political space through that connection with South Central Ambulance. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you. You preempted one of my final points.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I will repeat. Yes.
I am slightly concerned at the idea of, sort of drawing this to a close for a number of reasons. One, we don't have the appendix. Secondly, at the moment, we still don't know if the PCC is going to ask to become a member of the Fire Authority, sort of once central government has caught up with itself, so to speak, to amend the combination order. That was me being very polite, by the way. I am concerned about it. I would prefer a deferment to December. That gives us a chance to read the appendix, which is missing, and also we might have a bit more clarity from central government.
Right. Are you giving me a recommendation there? Yeah. Do you have a seconder for that recommendation? Right. Okay. Anybody? Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think that the situation is that we're 95% down the path of what we set out to do, but we're not totally there yet. I mean, the other thing which I think, or I thought was in the improvement plan, was the reduction of the size of the authority. It was to see what amendments we needed to make along the line further along. We've gone to what we think is right. We've set up a structure which we think is right, but it was to be trial that structure. So until we've really trialled it, and we've only been going on this structure for a few months, we need to, I think, have this open for a year from the start of our new 10-size fire authority, so that we can actually review along the line. And if we want to make any changes, then we should be able to do so. I'm not saying that we would be stopped in any case, but I think that to keep the thing open is the right way ahead. I agree with what Sharon has said about we don't know about the PCC. The government has not formally made the order yet. They may want to come back to us and want to make changes further, although Paul has said they're online at the moment, but we know how long the civil service take to do some of these things and get there. I just feel it's premature just closing it off and finalising it. We should keep it open for a year from the start of the new process, so that we've got a chance to come back and review what we set out and whether we've achieved it or whether we haven't.
Well, certainly, I would accept that we need to review what we're all going to be doing going forward. If you recall, well, some months back now, I indicated to the old authority that it was the intention to create what I term to be a strategic board. Now, we haven't been going that long, and we still have to sort of realign ourselves, and going forward I hope that we can align ourselves with specific officers, and some of us accept more specific responsibility for certain areas. But there hasn't been time, there's been so much happening, there hasn't been time to deal with that, and I suspect that it will be, won't be until the new year when we can sit down and deal with that. I don't know whether that really relates to this plan, but I don't have any issue really in leaving this. Does anybody else want to pass any comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the perfect analogy we have is that Neil wants to continue an oversight of the work that he's been doing and looking at what's happening with the introduction of new vehicles and everything else, because you don't say we've cut off, we're moving on. This is, as you've just mentioned, not implemented yet. We haven't done everything. I don't think we should put massive resources into it. I just think we should let it tick over while we see what happens, and then, if necessary, make adjustments. For instance, on the response vehicles, we may make an adjustment on the manufacturer. There are different things we may need to adjust as we go along, and to have the vehicle there so that we can do so seems to me to make more sense than to stop it and then restart with something completely different.
Sorry, switched myself off. Okay. Anybody got any other comment they wish to make? Yes.
I have no issue in actually keeping this open. So I have no issue with, I can see no issue with us keeping this open for a little bit longer, just to see how it goes and to make any changes that we need. And as you've said yourself, it's not, we haven't implemented everything that we've wanted to so far.
So I get the feeling that you're all quite content with Sharon's recommendation there. Well, I assume you are, because nobody else is coming up with any other comment. I think we will just agree that we will defer this item until a later date. Yes.
Just as a suggestion, Chairman, to help, it might be worth asking Kevin to craft a word that suggests that a recommendation that this is a progress report, and
we could do that.
A
yes.
further report
yes.
will be brought back to the following meeting.
Yeah, that's a sensible suggestion. Yeah.
Do we want it the next meeting or a future meeting?
Future meeting. Future meeting. Yes. Yes. I wouldn't want to put pressure on anybody to feel that they've got to do something. I mean.
No, I just noted that Councillor Price was talking about keeping it open for a little longer than Councillor Mintoff. So if we say future meeting, then we can have discussions
yes.
as to when the right time is.
Yeah, that's sensible. Yes. Yeah, thank you for that.
And that ties in, Chairman, if I may, with many of the actions in the 5%, which you
yes.
probably agree with,
yes.
Are actually not within our gift. We can't go out of the room and do things. We're now in the hands of others to progress that last 5%.
Yeah, so that's a sensible way forward. So, Kevin, can I just ask you to, you're writing it down there as we speak.
I'm just crazy.
He's good at that.
Well, just hang on just for a moment, and Kevin will read his recommendation.
Okay, Chairman. Something along the lines of that the authority note the report as a progress update and agree that a further update be brought to a future meeting of the authority.
Everybody happy with that? Okay. Right. Thank you all for that. So we now move to item 11, funding for Prince Philip Barracks and decentralised training. And this is going to be presented by Jason. And I have asked Jason to give us an update with the situation with regard to building 51A. It was 51A, wasn't it? Yes. So over to you, please, Jason.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, members. Members will know that due to the success of excellent community fire safety work over the past 10 years, there's been a 50% reduction in fire-related incidents, of which our crews have been attending. But accepting whilst that good work will continue, we still will have to remain prepared to respond to emergency incidents. We need our firefighters to be able to do that both safely and effectively. This is achievable through the introduction of new ways of working. So we've demonstrated in the past to the authority the concept of SAVE and our new technology through ultra high pressure alarms. Prince Philip Barracks in the north of the county in Borden, as members will be aware, is a unique training facility that is enabling us to deliver realistic live fire training to our crews, and as a leader within the country in that format, there's very few other fire and rescue services that are delivering that level of training to operational staff. Prince Philip Barracks and a decentralised delivery model will be key in also delivering service delivery redesign, such that our firefighters and officers are competent, safe in delivering an effective fire and rescue service, and most importantly, keeping members of the public protected and safe in their homes. So the purpose of the paper is to seek formal approval from the authority to fund continued realistic live fighting training through the Academy through to March 2022, and to that end a sum of money just short of £500,000 is required, and a breakdown of that is included within Appendix A. Hopefully the paper tabled today will have assisted members in understanding how this investment will improve firefighter safety, the skills of our firefighters, and for them to maintain competence whilst increasing public safety. And without going through any detail in the paper which has been tabled, I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, through you, could I ask, paragraph 11 says we will seek to sell off any spare capacity. So I presume that means income generation. How far have we got? I mean, is there a marketing plan to generate income from this? Or is this just a wish list?
No, it's part of the business plan for the Academy. I'd just like to reassure members that our first port of call with the use of any of our facilities is to train our own staff first. So through a training needs analysis, we are able to forecast where that sits. So our primary customer, if you like, through the Academy is our own staff. Beyond that, the facilities are available to stations and watches to book up on an ad hoc basis, and we encourage that continuously through the year, and also for our crews to train with other agencies such as neighbouring fire and rescue services where we may respond together, or other blue light partners. We know that there will be some capacity within Prince Philip Barracks that gives us the opportunity to sell that on to others, and we can do that quite legitimately through a cost recovery model, and also through the arrangements we have with the developers on site. And so as we move forward with the development of the Academy, and as we move into business as usual from our development phase of getting the Academy up to that position, we will seek to sell on that capacity where we can. And the cost recovery model does provide some funds back into central reserves, if that's the correct way of putting it, Rob. Have to be.
Can I just add to that, Jeremy? Thank you, Jason. And to perhaps reassure your question, we know there's at least 3 other services that are already using it and indeed are keen to enter into some other conversation about financing this. So we haven't included it in the paper intentionally because we think the money needs to be spent purely for the training of Hampshire firefighters. The side or the fringe benefit is that we can equally sell that to others, and which is a benefit. We're unable to cost that effectively to make it a kind of, would you do it on a business sense? We want it done because our firefighters need training, and that's the kind of key focus.
Jason, can I take you to legal implications, para 33, where there's a risk there, well, there's a risk highlighted there relating to a possible loss of £60,000. Can you just expand upon that?
I certainly can. Thank you, Chairman. So it would be remiss of me not to have included in the paper any risk to the authority, and what paragraph 33 refers to is any potential loss of investment. So originally we thought that the conversion of a building known as 51A, which effectively will become a lecture and welfare facility for our training staff and staff that go up there to receive training, would be in the region of around £60,000. And the reason that's highlighted as a risk is that the site itself is under continual development, and that is an outlay to convert that building. But to reassure members, we've had some clarification from the Whitehill and Borden Regeneration Company, who are the developers of their future programme of development for the site. And so, firstly, the schedule of work around the site is now being forecast to around 2027. So it goes beyond the 5-year period that we're asking for the money for and for our delivery of training here for another 5 years. The planning permission for that part of the site has not yet been granted yet, so there's no risk in the immediate term that the building will be demolished or part of that programme. And actually 51A sits adjacent to their headquarters site office, so logic dictates that that will be one of the last buildings to be developed anyway. It's a massive site, and if members haven't been up there yet, there are some opportunities in the future to go up and see the site yourselves for some exercises that will be run up there. In fact, the figure of £60,000 is now reduced. At the time of writing the paper, it was accurate, but since then, some of the quote has come in at a lower figure, and some of the work we were planning to do isn't necessary now. And actually, the developers have paid to have some of the toilet facilities converted free of charge to us anyway. So it's now around the figure of about £46,000. My professional feeling at the moment is it's a low risk, but I had to highlight that as part of the paper.
Right, thank you for that. So what you were telling us there was the worst possible case then. We'd lose, I don't know, whatever you're installing there, toilets and, I don't know, kitchen facilities, all that type of thing that you're putting in there so the crews can, you know, sort of be properly looked after when they're there. But from what you've just told us, that worst possible case is not likely to happen at all. Okay, fine. Thank you. That does clarify that paragraph. Good. Any other points any members want to make on this? No. Everybody happy with that? Okay. Well, and we've just to remind ourselves, we've got the date to go up there, haven't we? October the 29th. So the recommendation is on page 79, isn't it? 79? That £499,521.40p. How on earth do we have? Is approved. Well, we're approving 40 pence, yes. Is approved by Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority to enable the HFRS Academy to deliver realistic live fire training. That 40 pence is going to make it all the more realistic. through Prince Philip Barracks and locally at station level over a 5-year period until 21-22. All agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Yes.
Crucial.
Yes. Right, so we're now moving on to item 12 on the agenda. If I can get onto the signpost here. Oh, why won't this work? Oh, there we are. Perhaps my thumbs are too big. Right, so this is minutes of Standards and Governance Committee, which was held on the 15th of September. The Chairman, Luke Stubbs, is not here, so I'll invite the Vice Chairman, Councillor Rod Chadd, to present these minutes, please. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to present the minutes of the Standard and Governance Committee that took place on the 15th of September. All items were resolved at the meeting. Happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, thank you for that. I was present at the meeting as an observer. It was a very productive meeting, actually, and this is a very important committee as we move forward and we fulfil our function as the authority. So I don't think there's any need for any question, but if anybody has got any point they wish to raise, please do so. Noted. Noted? Okay, right, thank you. So we note and agree those minutes. Thank you for that. So we now move to our extra item, which I've got as a piece of paper. Yeah. So this is. Shall I start with this, Chairman? This is a extraordinary paper to consider the Deputy Chief Fire Officer role. It's a Chief Fire Officer report, so I will hand to Dave Curry to present the paper, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to introduce the paper. Urgent requirement. Thank you to the authority for placing it onto your agenda today. It is technically a Chief Fire Officer paper, so I present it. However, you'll see that the delegated authority requested is to the Deputy Chief Fire Officer and designate Chief Neil Odin, and therefore, in that regard, I'll ask Neil to just cover the detail. Thank you, Neil.
So pass the parcel. Thank you. Thank you, members. So essentially, my appointment means that clearly it will need to replace my role as I sit in today, the Deputy Chief Fire Officer. But equally at this time, I want the time with my team moving into the new year to consider what the future team's functions and the roles of the Deputy Chief and others will be. So it's important that we continue our good work and we continue to have someone at the helm of service delivery in the meantime. So what I'm seeking to do is put an interim Deputy Chief in my place from the 1st of January. And obviously to do that, I need to move quite quickly on that process. So we're able to hand over. So I'm requesting the delegated authority, because the Deputy Chief Officer's role is an authority position. It's an authority appointment. So I request the permission today to delegate that authority to me in conversation with the Chairman to appoint an interim Deputy Chief only for up to 18 months. And then once we've had the conversations and make some recommendations back about the roles of our senior team, should there be a further permanent appointment, obviously that will be on a fire authority appointment. So I'm happy to answer questions at that stage and your views.
Members, just to explain to you, we clearly couldn't consider this until we had made the appointment last Friday of our new Chief Officer with effect the 1st of January. And of course we have our meeting today, but then the next meeting is not until first week in December, which would have been far too late to consider this position. So that is the reason why you have this extraordinary paper. So, anybody got any questions? Yes.
Chairman, I'm not
very happy with the report as it is. I think that the Chief Fire Officer is an extremely important position, as is the Deputy Chief Fire Officer. They're both, critical to the organisation. I accept that this is going to be for a proposal of up to 18 months. And because it is a member appointment of the Deputy Chief, I think that other than just yourself, there should be more involvement from this authority. Because I don't know whether the intention is to make an internal appointment into this, whether to advertise, whether to look outside, what there is behind it. And I would want to know a lot more before I was prepared to actually just say, go ahead and cover a situation. Because I think, to me, is that we as an authority must be happy with who is going into that position as well. So I am not happy with just delegating it, with all respect to our new chief and to yourself.
Can I refer you to, well, the pages aren't numbered, but page 2, para 9. In the light of the temporary nature of the appointment, the need for the process to be undertaken swiftly, it's recommended that the process is ring-fenced for internal candidates only. So this is an interim appointment, and
Mr. Chairman, if we were going through the normal sort of process, you would actually have, as we've done, is appointed a chief. We would then go through, if we're going for a long term, an advertising process to get a deputy. I guess feel that by ring-fencing it, if you put somebody into that position, having ring-fenced it, then you're more or less, if we decided at a later stage that we need a deputy, you've almost committed yourself to that situation. I know legally you won't have done, but I think that it makes it much more difficult to then get
rid of somebody.
No, not get rid of somebody. It's a matter of getting in a broader spectrum of people from outside to actually look to see of what we actually want. I mean, I'm just very unhappy in this situation. I don't think it's right.
right. Well, the fire authority and the fire service are going through and still going through absolutely dramatic change. And within that, it's not the best time to change the chief fire officer. But I accept that we are, for reasons unconnected with the fire service. I mean, Dave has done his time, and he quite rightly wishes to retire. That I respect him for that. But it will be a time for the fire service to have a period of to stabilise and settle down and find an effective way forward. And that's really what this is all about. And then at the, well before the 18-month period, I'm sure it says in here somewhere, that we will be advertising in the same way as we have now for a chief fire officer. We'll be advertising for a deputy chief, and we'll go through the whole process if that is deemed to be the way forward. So.
Mr. Chairman, this has taken me by surprise, but it seems to me the way forward is that the people that were on the panel to appoint Neil should be consulted as well as yourself. If you get together, you can work it out however you want to work it out. Obviously, Neil needs a deputy. He obviously, again, has his own ideas, which quite rightly he's keeping to himself at the moment, over the way things go forward. But what we're setting up otherwise is that you and the new chief will make a decision that potentially puts somebody in an awkward position because they're becoming Deputy Chief Fire Officer, they then have to apply for their job in 18 months' time, potentially. If they don't get it, it becomes an embarrassment for them on their CV wherever they go. So you're bringing in a lot of pressures. Now, if you're going to do that, do it, but do it a bit more openly, I would suggest, by going back to the panel that appointed the new chief.
I hear what you say. These sort of situations are difficult, and I'm wary of discussing this in effectively open forum, but that I don't think those pressures will arise. I don't have any problem, and we haven't formally disbanded our panel, so I don't have any problem in keeping the panel and consulting with the panel. In fact, that's what I said to you earlier on before this meeting.
I think we...
Sorry, Chairman, I need to confirm that actually the Joint Appointments Committee was disbanded upon the appointment of a new chief.
I hadn't realised
that. Was written into its terms of reference. However, that wouldn't prevent you from naming that group of people as a group of consultees.
Okay, thank you for that. Neil, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I absolutely accept the concerns about officers' feelings in this, but I can assure you, our professional officers have often a career of joy and disappointment in our careers, and that's one of the things we prepare ourselves for. Notwithstanding that, I think I can understand the points you're making. One of the things that, and it sounds like we're getting there anyway, that sense of coming back to either consult with the wider group or even coming back to the authority with a firm recommendation about that selection. So those two things are in the options list about whether that is appropriate. But certainly wouldn't want to do that without sight of the authority in some sense. So, Chairman, maybe what you were getting to with either recalling the subcommittee or indeed coming back with a recommendation in December, which will give me time still, but not running a process after December, which is too late.
Kevin, I wasn't aware that we had disbanded the appointments panel had ceased to exist. And if you recall, when I gave you this paper earlier on, I did say that there would be, and I thought that was going to be the appointments panel. Can we sort of reconstitute that somehow? Can we just, how do we do it?
We need to reappoint to, I think the key is where the decision's going to lie. Is it going to be delegated to an officer in consultation with members, or is it going to be delegated to a committee of members? So that's the sort of the primary decision to make.
Right.
And then either way we would be...
Under item 17 options, B would actually cover, so we wouldn't have to rewrite a recommendation. It's just instead of going for option A, we go for option B.
Chairman, can you clear up? What is the requirement for choosing a deputy? Is it the same process as we've just gone through, or can Neil decide himself with you?
Chairman, it is an authority position, so it would be an authority decision, as Paul has described, similar to the Chief Fire Officer. Those two posts are within our constitution as authority positions.
And
but it's open then to the authority to delegate responsibility for that decision either to officers or to a committee. So the authority can either take the decision as a whole or it can delegate that decision to officers or to a committee. So the options that are open are to either delegate to Neil in consultation with the chairman or members, or to delegate to a committee, or to reserve the decision to the full authority.
I'd be worried appointing an interim deputy if, at the end of whatever the period of time is, that interim deputy is not chosen and therefore gets a slap in the chops. I just don't think that's very fair. I mean, either we have an idea about who might be the deputy chairman or we don't. Deputy chief, I mean.
Can I just come in perhaps to create a bit more clarity about what I said about the role of a deputy chief? So at the moment, if the deputy chief is doing my role, as in operational lead of Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service, that's a bit of a clearer choice, a bit of a clearer field, internally particularly. But externally, you have to be very clear about what you're after and those sort of things, and clearly you'd want a strong field. Now, I'd want to create that strong field, if that was the role. I want to create that strong field over the next year to 18 months to make sure we get the widest choice. But equally, in the conversations, in my thinking at this stage, where should a deputy chief be responsible for something slightly different within Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service and to the authority around strategic planning or something else, which should be about our future rather than our delivery, that's in my mind. So there's something around developing the role itself, and without reaching an answer now, that I would require to do over that period. But equally having someone right now, in January, that's going to carry on the job that it is now. So that, hence the speed and simplicity of reaching a conclusion on a uniformed head of operational delivery, which is what I do now, and that's quite important to me. So that hence the request for that delegation to me with reference to authority. As I said earlier, I think the timing allows me, probably the compromise here, is to reserve the decision for the authority, but I do the work in the selection process with the chairman or some other person from the authority, and we bring it back here for recommendation to the full authority that you can either agree with or otherwise. That may be the interim, rather than a committee which is going to take time to set up and a much more difficult, elongated process to run for an internal candidates that come from that field. That's the point I'm making.
Well, that would be a compromise, and that would mean a paper coming before the authority in December, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So we could add that into the recommendation then.
Sorry, I do tend to still disagree. I still think that the best way forward is for the B is, committee is the wrong word. We had a group of people who looked at the appointment for the chief, and I think if those people reconvened, and Neil could put his views to them, and then I believe that it probably would all get sorted in what have you, and then the full recommendation could come from them. This sort of situation is not going to be an easy thing with a name, which if members want to oppose that name, for instance, or say something about that, say, well, why haven't you looked at this person or whatever, in an open fire authority meeting is not going to be a good thing to do. We'd have to go into a part 2 or what confidential session. Why not have your same group look at it with the deputy and then make a recommendation to the fire authority, which then would probably take the personality situations totally out of it, and you could deal with it in an open meeting. The same is that, with all respect, Neil's appointment was reported to the fire authority earlier this morning, and that was done in an open meeting without all that was behind it.
Right. So, yeah.
Can I make the suggestion that maybe it's done within consultation with the group leads, so that being, yeah, which is, and can we, so that's not then the committee meeting that we had to appoint Neil, but actually yourself, as a group, we delegate that role to yourself as our group lead, and then Sharon and Roger, that it's done in consultation with the three of you.
Agreed.
Which is precisely what I said to you earlier this morning, before this meeting. When I gave you this paper, that's what I said to you, didn't I? Yes. Yes. So, are you make?
Do you want me to make that?
Yeah, yeah.
Can I make the recommendation that the appointments made in consultation with yourself, Roger and Sharon as group leads, along with Neil?
Yeah. Okay.
I will withdraw my proposition.
Right. Are you all agreed with that?
Seconded.
Good. Okay. So we've got a way forward with that then.
Kevin, work it out.
Chairman, can I just clarify then, though, that the delegation to make the appointment falls to Neil Oden?
Yes,
In consultation with yourself, with Councillor Price and with Councillor Mintoff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent.
Good. It'd be a silly CFO to come in and go against that group.
Right. Well, we got there in the end. Thank you all for your contributions there. So just before we finish, one or two dates to remind you of. First of all, I will be representing you this Sunday. Are you coming with me?
I am, yes.
Yes. October the 29th. I will be in Winchester Cathedral, and I've written it down here, the Law Sunday Choral Matins, when we'll be there with the judges and the High Sheriff and I don't know who else. But anyway, I'm there to represent you.
Which Sunday is it?
This Sunday, this coming Sunday. The 9th, or whatever day it is. So, some other dates here. At our awareness session, you heard this morning about the conference on the 13th of November. I can't be there, but I will be recording a video, and I would be grateful if as many of you as possible can attend the conference. Clearly, it's an opportunity for us to meet with firefighters and engage with them. So please put that in your diaries and attend that if you're able to. 13th of November. Another important date, Thursday the 23rd of November, Celebrating Success. This is again at Netley, I think, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yes. And this is where we celebrate the success of the last year for the fire service, and there are various awards, and it's an outstanding event. It is hosted by Steve Power from Power FM.
Not on this occasion. He's
Oh, is it?
He's
Oh, it's
moved
not
to
him.
the evening show, which prevents him.
Who's going to do it? Who's doing it then? Who? Oh, right.
Lady presenter for.
Oh, so I won't be able to talk about red wine then, which I have done for the past few years, because he's an expert in red wine. He goes to France often. Right, so that's 23rd of November. What else did I have to tell you about? Oh, yes. The next meeting on the 5th of December, you heard earlier that Lena Samuels from South Central Ambulance will be coming to our awareness session to talk about her role, and then hopefully she'll attend our full meeting. The meeting, where's Becky? Are we able to confirm the venue, Becky?
Not just yet. I'm visiting on the 27th of October, so I'll be able to let you know after that date whether we're through.
Okay. Right. Well, where we're hopeful of having the meeting is at because we can't use this room here. We're hopeful of having the meeting at the Sky Museum down in Southampton, where we've got the police and fire heritage site. And in December, it will be ideal to be there, and it will be the final meeting for our Chief Fire Officer. So I'm sure it'll be an excellent occasion, albeit it'll be a formal meeting of the authority, but nevertheless, it'll be They probably have a Christmas tree up there as well, won't they? So it'll be an interesting meeting.
Chairman, just on that.
Yes.
Can I just mention the reason we're not here, just for our understanding, is that phase 2 of the project building works starts here on the headquarters site, which sees the revamp of our old training and development department into the academy and our fit for purpose building, and also the extension of the headquarters site, which will provide 50 more open plan seating, which we hope Blue Light Partners will take advantage of, as well as a conference facility which will house your Fire Authority meetings once complete next summer. So need to come off site for this particular Fire Authority meeting in December, but for really good purpose, because again we're pushing forward the development of this site and the capability placed upon it. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you for that. The only other thing, sorry.
Can I just ask, down at the next authority meeting is parking. That's my recollection of going to...
I'll let Jeff, they do have a car park, but Jeff can...
I raised the very same thing, Roger, and there is a car park out the rear which Alan assured me would be reserved for our use. What, just to tell you very quickly, what brought this up, when we were there for the launch of the heritage site, Alan took us around the whole site, and then Jeff and I found this, in effect, like a conference room there, didn't we? Which we didn't know existed, and apparently it's used by cadets. I don't know, well, they won't be there when we're there, but it's bigger than this. It's big enough, provided we can get our comms all set up, it will be ideal, and we'll be supporting Alan in all that he's doing. So at the back of that, you look out the window and there's quite a big car park there, so I think we should be okay, hopefully. Just very quickly, I will be in London next Tuesday, I think it is, for the launch of the inspectorate, and then the day after, some of us have to go to conference at Y Boston Lake. But then you mentioned, Roger, there's the Fire Commission. I don't know if I can go to that as well. That'll be the whole week, so I don't know. You're going.
I'm going to the Fire Commission, yes.
Who else are you? Who's going to the Fire?
Either me or Neil. I think it's Neil.
You're going to the Fire Commission as well as Y Boston Lake. So I don't think I can do that. So it's incredibly short notice. But have we got anybody else that would be able to volunteer to attend the Fire Commission? Because I think we could do that, couldn't we?
Yeah, we still have a place.
We have a place there. It's in London. I'm sorry, it's short notice, but.
I think Chris, it's political parties and they are named. I don't know. I mean,
well, I can just write and say I'm unable to attend and I nominate a deputy. I can do that.
I'm not sure you can. I mean, you need to check with the RGA. All I'm saying is named people from each political party. And, the political parties then do have top-up numbers and all sorts of things, and that's how they get to the people who can go. I personally would be very pleased to see somebody else go.
Okay.
But I just think you need to check it out.
We'll check.
Okay, well, it's only Wednesday today. It is Wednesday, isn't it? I think so. Yes. So we'll investigate that and try and find out. Right. Sorry, I've been talking far too much. Anybody got anything else they want to say before we conclude the meeting?
One very quick point.
Yeah.
Dates. Again, we were talking about dates. When will the next year's calendar be out of dates for all of the meetings? Because now we've got.
We have to ask Kevin that.
We need to get them into the diary, otherwise we're going to be clashing. This is what happened with Michael D.
Yes.
The calendar for 2018-19 is currently being drawn up in conjunction with the County Council calendar, and we'll be looking at the City Councils as well to try and avoid any clashes for anyone.
When is it likely to be out?
I hope fairly soon. I can't give an exact date.
Thank you, Kevin. Sharon, you wanted to say something?
Yes, we've also got a Blue Light stakeholder event here at 10 o'clock on Friday the 20th, I believe. I've got it in my diary.
So we'll be in touch, but we think that may now be pushed back into the new year, but we'll let her know this week.
I think we've had a very productive meeting, so thank you all for your contributions, and we now formally close the meeting. Thank you.